Welcome back to Big Red Rant. The bye weeks are finally over. Gary, big matchup versus Illinois, number 17 in the country. A lot of people feel like Illinois is having a miracle season to be where they are. Do you agree, or are they the real deal?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think, I'm big on talking about, those foundations of football with the offense and defensive lines. They've got that. I don't think they have a ton of skill players around them. Those guys look better, I think, because of what they have in the trenches, and that's perfect for Big Ten football. That's great, and that'll hide a lot and kind of amplify what you have surrounding that. But also, you look at their schedule; they haven't really played, in Oklahoma, or they haven't even played some of the better schools in the Big Ten yet. That's debatable. They beat Wisconsin and Minnesota, but Wisconsin's fired their coach and Minnesota's not having a year a lot of people thought they would have. So I think it's a little bit of a mixture of both, but they're definitely good. You can't take away from them solely based on, they haven't played anybody. They do what they do really well. They're one of those teams where you know what they're going to do, and so far you just can't stop it, with the exception of Indiana. But I don't think they're going to end the season in the top 25, but I don't think that it's a false position that they're in now. I think they've done exactly what you would expect from a team that's that physical and that well built in the trenches in the Big Ten.
Gary, I refuse to look past Illinois. I'm not trying to be braggadocious, but I am the one that called in our predictions video a long time ago. I called a loss to Illinois, and I'm going to stand by it. I really hope it doesn't happen. I do think it's possible that we win because we're playing so much better now. But I just respect the hell out of Brett Bielema. I might be the only one.
No, I think everybody does. I think there's a lot of talk of he's from Illinois. So I think that's kind of the saving grace as far as Illinois hanging their hat on that he won't leave. But he's definitely going to get looks. You look at how many schools have already gotten rid of their coaches. More's coming at the end of the year. So he's definitely going to pop up for things. People talk about him for this. People talk about everybody for this job, every possible candidate, guys that are still coaching and don't look like they're planning on leaving. He's one of them. So, I don't think people don't respect him. I think you're 100% right. I think you're going to look really good with that prediction after the game, but we'll see.
Well, you say I'm going to look good after the game with that prediction, but you were telling me the more and more you looked at the situation, you think the Huskers are going to pull out a win.
I don't necessarily think they're going to pull out a win. I think leading up to this game, before I looked into it, clearly it's going to be a loss, right? What's our biggest problem? Offensive line. What's our second biggest problem? Defensive line. What are they really, really good at? Those two things. Our offensive line deficiencies, and now especially with injuries, to where we can't even really rotate as well as we'd like to. That's going to be exploited. Casey's running for his life. We're not going to be able to establish a run game. That's my first thoughts. The more I look into it, and I look at Bielema specifically, they didn't do well against Indiana because Indiana had their two top receivers that they didn't have when we played them. And their quarterback threw for 300 and some yards on that defense. And then, they ended up losing. They didn't rush hardly at all against Illinois. And a big part of that is time to throw. But also look at what he did in the SEC. Bielema's style is perfect for the Big Ten. Smash mouth, run the ball, own the trenches, time of possession, things like that. I think if Nebraska can figure out a way to give Thompson time, we've talked about it the last couple of games, whether that's quarterback run play, what Martinez did to him last year with some of his big runs. We all know Thompson doesn't have that athleticism that Adrian Martinez has, but he's a better passer. So if he can run enough, if we can throw out of the backfield enough, if we can keep Grant and maybe, Brewington, guys like that back to help, they run a 3-4, but they run odd. So those outside linebackers essentially are wide defensive ends, and they bring pressure. They switch them up. Sometimes they come up the middle on blitz packages. They do a little bit of bluffing as far as the secondary, whether they're in zone or man. They predominantly, from what I've seen, it's a lot of man. I don't know how well that's going to work with a guy like Palmer, but I think if you can exploit that, if they go man, they're not going to be able to contain Palmer. If they bracket him, if they throw a safety over the top, or they try to bump him inside and pass him off and keep guys around him, you're going to really need other guys to do what they can do. Washington's proven he's more than capable of being a go-to guy. Oliver Martin, they were talking in the press conference, he's always going to the side and saying he's open. Mickey said he goes back and looks at the tape. He usually is open. Seems like he's tough to cover. So, I mean, we have weapons and options at the skill positions to beat most of the teams in the Big Ten, especially the Big Ten West. But again, the line play is going to be what it hinges on. But I think if a lot of the talk when we play these teams is we have to out whatever they do to them. Like with Rutgers, they're a physical team and we need to out physical them, or at least match their physicality. Purdue, they're a little more finesse team. They're going to throw and do these things. We need to be prepared for that. And we need to be a little bit more athletic and quicker and on the ball with that. And now they're back to talking about the toughness and the physicalness of Illinois. I don't think that's the route I'd go. You know, obviously nobody gives a damn what I think, and I'm not getting paid to coach anybody. But if you can score, I know everybody wants us to keep our offense on the field as long as possible so our defense isn't getting wore down. But if we can score quickly with Palmer and our skill position guys and put their offense back on, at some point, they're going to have to start passing the ball. You know, but I mean, I'm assuming that we're scoring quick most of the times we have the ball. That will get them out of their rhythm and not allow them to do their thing with being physical and keeping a tempo type game that we've seen from them in all their wins. You know, most of these teams are playing to their strength and they're better at it than them so far. I don't think that's the answer. I hope there's more Alante Brown. I would like to see Tommy Hill start getting some touches, just things in the passing game that he's shown. You know, like I said, SEC, they're not a smash mouth conference. They don't line up and run the ball. They spread things out. They throw a lot. They do run to keep things balanced and do whatnot. But I think Nebraska's capable of mimicking that type of an offense. And he's proven that that's tough for him to deal with. That's why he got fired from Arkansas. So, I mean, if I'm the coaching staff, I'm looking more towards what Indiana did. I'm looking more for what he struggled with at Arkansas against offenses, especially. And I would lean in more to that and maybe have to make adjustments at halftime if it's not working, but try to do the Scott Frost mindset of make them adjust to us if you can. Don't try to take this offensive line that has kept you from winning games you should win and kept you from keeping your quarterback upright all year and expect all of a sudden, okay, now that we're halfway through the season, now they're going to be solid and we're going to be able to establish this power running game and we're going to be able to keep a quarterback up and do those things. I wouldn't waste my time with that.
If Mickey wins this game, is he the coach next year?
I don't think so. I mean, I hope so. I don't think this game decides it one way or the other, though. You know what I mean? I really do think it's going to be a full sample of the rest of these 5 games to see what happens. I feel like he did himself a huge favor getting Malachi Coleman to commit. I think that's a big thing that gets lost when you're looking at head coaching candidates is wins and losses on their head coaching record. Like, yeah, that's great. But if you think Nebraska's different, and that's why you can get a lot of these coaches, wins and losses alone aren't going to be the same here and in this conference as they are maybe other places, right? So if you've got a guy who took a dumpster fire and turns it into 2-2 since he's been coaching, and let's be honest, he didn't have a prayer against Oklahoma coming directly off the firing of Frost and things like that. You got to look at the other things that coaches can do. One of the big knocks that we hear when we did the Matt Campbell and when we did the Dave Aranda videos is those fan bases especially are like, everyone knows you can't recruit at Nebraska. Mickey seems to be doing a hell of a job no matter where he's at recruiting. And he's showing that now, even though he doesn't know that he's going to have the job. He's still doing it. So that's a big leg up in being able to recruit here. They just offered a bunch of JUCO players, linemen, this past bye week, offers to try and get that. And he's obviously knows what needs to be fixed and he's going after those guys. The culture seems to be changing. I think a lot of things like that are going to play in as much as the wins and losses. Now, if he loses out, I don't think those things are going to matter as much. But if we lose some close games and we pull off a couple wins, I don't think anybody's going to look back after the Iowa game the Friday after Thanksgiving and go, well, we lost every game, but we won that Illinois game, so he's got it locked up.
This may come off as a hot take, but I definitely think you're right about Malachi Coleman. Getting him is a big up for Mickey and keeping the job. I think you combine that with a win against number 17 Illinois. I know that a lot of people have issues with them even being 17 and thinking that they're not a legit top 20 team, but you combine those two things, I think I'm ready to give him the job, take that interim tag off, and let him go to work recruiting as the head coach, because you can tell, like you said, he can bring in the talent. If he beats a ranked team this season, come on, what are we doing here?
So you're saying come out Sunday or Monday and name him the head coach if we win this? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I don't think there's any way they do that. I'd be beyond shocked. Because what happens if, let's say Nebraska beats Illinois. Illinois goes on a 3-game skid, and we don't win another game except for maybe Iowa. Now all of a sudden this game doesn't look as good as a win. If he keeps recruiting and doing his thing, that goes back to what I'm saying before, and that for sure will help him and kind of prop him up and keep him in the mix. But to just be like, okay, we're done, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Even if you know 90%, 95% sure that that's going to be your guy, there's still 4 games left of the season.
So Heinrich goes out the same week that Illinois' running back, the best running back, in the conference in the country, comes to town. We've moved
against the worst run defense.
Right. We've moved Kolarvik into that spot, which personally I'm a fan of. I'd rather he be there.
Me too.
What do you predict score-wise, considering we're trying to stop that run? It's going to be so strong.
Well, I mean, it varies drastically depending on how well they can slow down. You're not stopping that run. So how well you can slow down that run, and if they do kind of decide that they're going to turn it into a track meet on the offensive side of the ball, right? If they kind of stick with what they've been doing, I think Illinois will just grind out a win that'll gradually get bigger and bigger to the end of the game, and they'll beat us 31-17 type game. If Nebraska comes out and they're throwing deep balls to Palmer and they're throwing crossing routes and shit like that to Alante and to Washington and hitting Martin on other things, and Vokalek's hitting the seams, and we're just right down their throats in the air. And with these linebacker changes, the problem with the linebacker changes is they're going to have to be the saving grace. He's getting into the second level every time. Like, our defensive fronts have shown they can't stop it. So at some point, you're going to have to rotate these guys, and then you're going to start getting the backups that we've had trouble with the gap assignments and the tackling. Our more sure tacklers have been Reimer, have been Kolarvik, and have been Gifford. So I like the idea those 3 are going to be the core that's in that second level. I just don't know how good their offensive line is going to be against all of that. We've seen it, like I said, against some other teams that frankly have better defensive lines than us, but I don't know about that second level so much, especially when we're going to hone in. We should just be man in the secondary. Don't get beat. They don't have a Charlie Jones or anything like that. So if that's the case, I really think we could get them in a bad spot by halftime to where they're in a position they haven't been all year, maybe getting a little bit desperate, and we have a chance to really kind of hold the reins and take control of the game. If that's the case, I would see us in the mid 30s to upper 30s, and them, in the mid to upper 20s. Yeah, I say two very drastic outcomes depending on what Nebraska does.
I agree. That sounds about right. Mid 30s sort of game. We're better offensively than I think a lot of people thought we were going to be after we showed up so poorly in the beginning of the season. Like, Whipple's offense is kind of nice.
Yeah, and we're not super lopsided anymore. At the beginning of the year, everybody was like, oh, you stop Anthony Grant, you stop their offense. Well, now they're learning, no, you need to stop Palmer. So can you stop both? And if you do, or you at least contain one and manage to pretty much stop the other. So say you manage to double or bracket Palmer to slow him down a little bit, and you're able to kind of suffocate Grant. Okay, does Hill make an appearance and do something? Does Washington and Martin and guys like that, Brown, kind of start making a name for themselves, where it took a while for Trey Palmer in that passing game to get going when everybody was worried about Grant? I don't know, man, but I think it's definitely possible.
Tell us what you think in the comments. Do you see the Huskers winning this game? Give us a score even in the comments, if you will. And as always, hit the like button. We'll see you guys next time after the Illinois game. Until then, go Big Red.